Okay, so welcome to my learning environment, Hackett Middle School. It has a total student enrollment of 633 students, 49 full-time teachers, and a 13 to 1 student ratio, and offers grades 6 through 8. There's a 100% passing rate on Regents and algebra examinations. Mr. Lustig, my mentor teacher, is an 8th grade ELA teacher. He has some of the highest improvement scores, some of in the district from what I understand. The students in Hackett are organized into two teams, 8A and 8B, both taking classes on the left or right side of the building. Each team has an honors course, educates students with disabilities and IEPs, and I believe 8B exclusively teaches students who are learning English as a second language or new language. Mr. Lustig has an honors class. He teaches 6 sections, another being an enrichment period, which is similar to a study hall type of period where students read for 10 minutes silently at the beginning of the period and then have the option to work on assignments and do homework. Other teachers in the team will give the enrichment period teacher for a specific team homeroom worksheets and assignments which they can then turn in for extra credit. This agenda is reflected on the board during Mr. Lustig's enrichment period on the smart board, which brings me into my first explanation for how Mr. Lustig utilizes his classroom space and materials. One thing that is always regulatory in Mr. Lustig's classroom is that there are 2 learning targets written on the left-hand corner of the whiteboard. One that is long-term and one that is short-term for individual lessons and days. Sometimes there's more than one short-term. On the smartboard to the right every day there is an agenda which always starts with a bell ringer to introduce the lesson of the day. Each activity or component of the lesson on the agenda even has an estimated time in the parentheses next to it so that both him and his students can know what is expected of the lesson and how long each part will take. I haven't noticed students copying the agenda or the learning targets into their notebooks or any evidence of this being enforced by Mr. Lustig, but I think that would be a good idea, at least for the learning targets. He collects and grades their notebooks somewhat periodically, and he has students bring a single notebook to class, which you'll notice on the board he has instructions for creating a table of contents on the first page, skipping 3 or 4 pages, and labeling each day of notes in the corner with a number. This is so students can reference back to their notebook as a reference or a study guide, and just to keep on track with what is going on in the classroom. I personally like the idea, but depending on how I develop my curriculum, I may do a spin-off or something with one of my own ideas for managing notes and classroom materials. Mr. Lustig has a big box of notebooks under his desk, and he gave them out to students if they didn't have any after the first day of the second week of school, in which in exchange he just had them give another notebook back at any point in the year. That brings me into my next aspect of the learning environment, which is the resources he has in the classroom. He doesn't give out any pens or pencils and made that clear to them the first day. There is a classroom library in the back of the room, which is basically a school bookcase that has many different kinds of books from fiction to nonfiction to reference like dictionaries and thesauruses. There's nothing too culturally responsive in the room as far as in the sense of linguistic diversity. For example, there's no bilingual books or books in other languages, which is something I'm going to be mindful of implementing in my own classroom, especially based on the demographics I'll be teaching. There's also boxes of books around the room, like a lot of one single book, mainly young adult literature, which, like I said, I didn't notice anything particularly in terms of cultural responsiveness. As far as accessing his own materials, Mr. Lustig has a basic functional Windows desktop computer where he accesses the school grading website PowerSchool, which is open to students and parents. He also holds his documents, particularly his agendas and the files for his classroom handouts in the computer, such as short stories and worksheets. The computer is connected to the smartboard. He also has a overhead projector and a lift-down screen above his chalkboard, which I haven't seen him utilize yet. As far as the visual aids and design of the classroom, so to speak, there's not a lot going on. You have a school-wide laminated behavioral expectations poster, which I've seen all over the school. It doesn't necessarily give a personal feel to the classroom environment, which is something I would criticize. I would probably put a behavioral expectations poster somewhere in the room that is more specific to my classroom philosophy and for even content and assignment routines and other important things that I need to enforce regularly in my classroom. The room is pretty much bare otherwise, which, from what I understand, there was a misunderstanding the day before the first day of school with him having to move rooms, and so I know he has some boxes laying around with things that he probably can utilize. It would be a good idea for me to encourage we start opening up those boxes and offer some assistance in designing the room. Whenever I get the free time to do that, I'd be more than happy to. In terms of the chalkboards, the cork boards, excuse me, you see displayed all across the room. He has laid out specific purposes for each one besides the back two, which are the least visible to students. By his desk, there's a bell schedule and some important things school-wide, and for his own personal reference. To the left of that board is one that is designated to display student work, which hasn't yet been utilized. This is good because it is a board you see prominently when you first walk into the classroom, so students will see their own work every day when they walk in if it is displayed on the board. I know there's another board next to it which doesn't have any sign declaring it's for student work, but I believe he will be utilizing that for the same purpose. In the back right corner of the room is Mrs. Villa's desk. She is a special education teacher for the team, and there are two other TAs or aides that operate within the team and are present at the classroom during different periods. I believe Mrs. Villa has the most responsibility for working with students who have specific learning needs. She manages their assessments and goals and has various other responsibilities specific for being a special education teacher. She has her own desk, but she operates in the other content classrooms for the team throughout the day. You'll notice she has her own whiteboard and corkboard, which I haven't seen her utilize yet. Next to that, to the right, is another corkboard with a writing strategy that Mr. Lustig created, which is now used throughout the entire district. It is an acronym for building an academic paragraph called RFTITC, which is restate, for example, this shows, in addition, this also shows, and in conclusion. I've already seen him introduce and implement this strategy in lessons. He has collected assessments for using this strategy, and I've already seen students look up at it for reference while working in the classroom. The final thing to discuss is the desk configuration, which Mr. Lustig says he utilizes to have them pair up and work with a partner for some bell ringers and assignments. They're all front-facing, which is a pretty conventional desk configuration in my experience. When I interviewed Lustig, he stated he utilizes homogeneous and heterogeneous grouping in his classroom instruction and will pair students up with partners that he decides on for different purposes. He gives these partner assignments nicknames like New York partner or Los Angeles partner. Again, desk configuration is something that I'm currently developing as I study my own practice, so I'd have to understand how I plan to develop my curriculum and other classroom routines and policies to really definitively decide on the most effective desk configuration. For example, I hope to be able to include a lot of opportunity for open classroom discussions in my class, so perhaps a desk configuration where students face each other as well as in front of the classroom would be good. Like I said, this would really all depend on the factors that have yet to be determined for my own practice. With that said, Mr. Lustig is an excellent mentor, teacher, and role model. I have some fresh perspectives and ideas that I would want to incorporate, and I believe I would want to do more in terms of what students see around them in a learning environment every day. I want to make it a little more rich, vibrant, useful, and even inspiring in whatever ways that I can in terms of the decoration. I think he has excellent usage of his own resource and materials, for example with the agenda, but again, I might want to do more and utilize the smart board to develop lesson plans that are presented colorfully and build student engagement. Perhaps I would write the agenda down on the whiteboard as well. This assignment made me look forward to, I think, a more fun and creative aspect of teaching and has assisted me in being mindful about the rationale behind the choices I make in the learning environment. Thank you.